Kweulukut, Tanse, hello, bonjour. I first want to acknowledge that we're here on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Far too many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis families across this country are living with the unimaginable grief and consequences of gender and race-based violence. It falls upon everyone in our society to protect both current and future generations from living with the tragic effects of this crisis and experience the loss of their loved ones. We recognize the important role we all have in ending this violence and providing support for families and communities. It's why this past Saturday, on June 3rd, we released our second Federal Pathway Annual Progress Report. It demonstrates the unwavering commitment and efforts from over 20 federal departments and agencies to end violence against Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQI+ people. Over the last year, we've also continued to advance the priorities outlined in the National Action Plan and respond to calls for justice directed at the federal government. Notwithstanding, it's important for me to acknowledge that this work is not about reports or numbers or checking boxes, it's about people. Au cœur de nos efforts se trouvent les femmes, les jeunes filles et les personnes bispirituelles qui recherchent davantage le soutien des familles et des survivants qui ont besoin de meilleur accès aux programmes et aux services, les organisations qui sont sur le terrain et qui possèdent des connaissances et des solutions pour mettre fin à cette crise. We'll continue this work together to make a positive, long-lasting impact in key areas. This includes housing, shelters, transportation, infrastructure, and direct supports for well-being of families and survivors. The Witsat Youth Healing Lodge project, for example, shows some of the important work completed this year. This space was created to empower Indigenous youth, particularly young women, girls, and 2S LGBTQI+ people, by sharing traditional culture and fostering healing and community connection. In British Columbia, we've provided support to the Luma Native Housing Society, who offer safe and culturally appropriate accommodations for Indigenous women and children who have suffered domestic violence. And our government has worked with the locally at First Nation to develop a community plan, a safety plan in addressing violence against women, children, men, and elders. In the Yukon, we've provided ongoing funding to support the Yukon Aboriginal Women's Council in developing a taxi program that aims to reduce gender-based violence for Indigenous women and girls, 2S LGBTQI+ people who require transportation. Dans tout le pays, ces initiatives font une réelle différence dans les vies des femmes, des filles, des personnes de LGBTQ+ autochtones et rendent les communautés plus sûres. I want to point out other key areas of progress from this year's report. Over 1,000 Indigenous language projects were successfully funded. We've introduced the National Action Plan to end gender-based violence and the federal 2S LGBTQI+ Action Plan. Jennifer Moore-Rattray was appointed as a ministerial special representative to lead work related to Call for Accountability, Call for Justice 1.7. Innovation 7, an Indigenous organization, will lead the work necessary for an oversight mechanism to respond for calls for Justice 1.10. Families of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls have long called for accountability in responding to the calls for justice and in making sure that they get the answers that they deserve. We've heard from many Indigenous partners that the acceleration of Call for Justice 1.7 that I mentioned earlier, and all calls for justice, is critical. Bien que toutes ces mesures représentent des avancées importantes, je sais que nous n'avons fait qu'effleurer la surface. Il nous reste encore beaucoup à faire. Last week, we announced the funding of $95.8 million over 5 years and $20.4 million ongoing to support Indigenous families in accessing information about their missing or murdered loved ones and to enhance victim services to support their healing journeys. Ce n'est là qu'un exemple des mesures concrètes que nous prenons et nous continuerons de prendre au cours de l'année à venir pour répondre aux besoins des communautés autochtones et combler les lacunes dans les services. Looking ahead, we'll also be prioritizing discussions on a red dress alert system, an oversight mechanism, and an Indigenous human rights ombudsperson. The crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is ongoing, and with its magnitude, we need to continue to work together on a comprehensive response to address the complexity and interconnectivity of its root causes, as well as address the needs for accountability. As evidenced in the current budget, we reaffirm our commitment to accelerate these efforts through ongoing and further collaboration, investments, and initiatives in order to create safety for all Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQI+ people, no matter of their circumstances. Ending this crisis will require ongoing collaboration, investments, and initiatives from all levels of government. C'est dans cet esprit que je réaffirme notre engagement à mener à bien ce travail essentiel aux côtés des familles, des survivants, des dirigeants, des partenaires des Premières Nations, des Inuits et des Métis. Nous ne pouvons pas nous arrêter tant que la sécurité des femmes, des filles et des personnes bispirituelles autochtones n'est plus à risque. Miigwech, Kuyanemik, merci, thank you et merci.